Hi, everybody. Tom Van Hoy with Pitt State men and women's cross country coach Russ Jewett on this edition of the Pitt State Cross Country Insider Show. The Pitt State men and women at Joplin last weekend for the Missouri Southern Stampede there. Women finished second at Southwest Baptist ahead of third place Missouri Southern. PSU's Jessica Macy won the University Division race by 36 seconds. Casey Epps 9th, Alex Mose 15th, Carlin Green finished 16th, and Paige White 18, top 5 for Pitt State. PSU men, third back of Missouri Southern and SBU. Alex Bogina finished 10th and Chris Wise 11. Ren Bean 29, Ethan Silvosky 31st, and Talon Thompson 33rd, the top 5 for the PSU men. We'll start with the women and their performance last weekend. Here's Russ Jewett.
Well, I was pleased with them overall. We had a couple of glitches here or there, but our front runner Jessica Macy been training a long time and finally got to put a uniform on against some other collegians and pretty much performed up to her fitness level, which pleasantly surprised me. No real mistakes there in her race. And then I think Casey Epps had an outstanding race, one of her best of her college career. We had a couple of freshmen, I thought, Carlin Green and Paige White, that stepped up and were impact runners in their first intercollegiate meet. So I was pretty happy with our women's team.
You know, when you look at that, and Jessica wins by 36 seconds, is that a big margin of victory in a cross-country race?
Well, it's pretty big, I guess. It's different in different races. There was actually a couple of Division I runners in there you're probably not seeing in your results, but yeah, against the next Division II runner. And that's a pretty good runner there, that girl from Harding. So it just depends. I mean, we're going to a meet this weekend where you won't see anything like that, but I was surprised that she was able to win by that margin.
Hey, let's just backtrack a moment. I know we talked last week a little bit about the distance that the women run versus the men, and just how is that ever established that they run those particular distances?
Well, I don't know how this 5K distance was established, but probably it relates to track and field, and why we're not miles still instead of kilometers, I'm not sure, because I think the English folks and we Americans are probably the ones that dominated track and field when it was really going strong in the early part of last century, but. We did move the championship distance for women to 6K, and I think that was all about having something unique, and it's just I think it's a step on the way to the same distance the men race. In cross country, the women farthest they'll run is 6K, and the men race 10K, and the women are certainly just as talented as the men relative to their gender and tough, so it's a matter of time before we get to the 8 and 10K for women, but 6K is on the way.
Hey, you were talking about Jessica Macy, who won it, making a few mistakes. When you go into a meet, is there a strategy both individually and as a team what you want to try to accomplish and how you want to run the race?
Yeah, our sport is probably the simplest that you'll find out there, and people hear me say all the time there's a difference between simple and easy, because easy it is not. But there is some strategy and there are tactical considerations in any race. Anytime that you have hills and turns and rough footing and wind and times when your opponent that you think you can beat can get out of sight from you around a blind corner or something, and lots of bodies in a race, weather, those things all impact your strategy to some extent, and certainly your tactics. But we had a pretty simple. We just want our kids to be able to get out aggressively and find their goal position fairly early. At least this weekend, that's what we wanted, and then to hold on to that goal position, which pretty simple strategy, but it's really hard to execute. And I thought our women did a pretty good job of that.
All right, as far as cross country 101, take us through the top 5 score. Is that how it is?
That's right. You want a low score. 15 is the lowest score you can have, and that's by virtue of adding your individual place numbers for each of your athletes. So if you went 1 through 5, the top 5 places in the race, that's 15 points. That's the lowest. You want the lowest score possible.
So are you trying to keep track? I mean, those that are on the course know, hey, I'm the 4th runner for Pitt State, or I'm the 5th runner, and you kind of know where you are in that regard?
Yeah, you do, and sometimes that's not crucial necessarily. You have a plan that might relate to your pace for the first mile or maybe overall place in the race, but usually there is some kind of a sort of a sub-plan or a sub-strategy where you're pairing up with another teammate, or maybe there's 3 of you, or sometimes even you want your whole top 5 to come through a certain point together. There is some psychological and maybe some physical benefit to a pack mentality in running. However, if you've got someone like Jess Macy and you hold her way back so that the others can physically be with her for very long, then you're probably not doing your team much justice. So we don't do that with her necessarily. But yeah, we pack it in with some of the other groups.
Well, you had more than 5 run in the race. Do just the top 5 count? I mean, if you have 6 or 7 and 8 that pass, let's say the 5th runner for Missouri Southern or something like that, does that come into play or not?
That's a great question, and it does. It did against us. I mean, we got beat at our number 5 spot by Southwest Baptist number 6. So your top 7 runners actually score a place, but the 5 of those 7 count toward your score. So in other words, your number 6 and your number 7 can hurt someone else's score, can add to it. They can't really help yours. But that's the case that happened against us, against Southwest Baptist, and that's the kind of thing we did last year with a very deep team without a front runner. We were able to do that last year's team.
Visiting with Russ Jewett, Pitt State men and women's cross-country team who performed well at Missouri Southern last weekend. And is cross-country at all, let's say, like football and for the first meet of the year, the first game of the year, where you try to control emotions at all? You just want to get out there and get going, maybe go too fast.
No, I think that's certainly an element in our sport. It might have more to do with the person than how deep into the season you are. Some student athletes they run more on emotion than others, and you have to kind of learn their style and about them before you can kind of coach them up on that. But yeah, I think the first one, especially the first longer race, our first meet was a shorter race. This was actually, our regulation distance for the most part. And yeah, you have to kind of reel in the emotions, and we try to uncork those emotions when you really need them, when you're hurting really bad and you need to draw upon some source of energy, to make you keep your foot on that gas pedal while you're hurting really bad. And that's, if you want to get emotional in a race, that's the time to do it.
Do you see that more so with freshmen maybe than those that have been through it before?
Yeah, just inexperience, and emotion sometimes. Anxiety is sort of an emotion, I guess, if you will, and that's maybe comes into play more with freshmen. There's the element of the unknown, and again, some of these girls we have on the team had never raced 5K. If they're a Kansas runner, 4K is their distance, and then even the other girls that have raced 5K will go to the 6K distance, and sometimes there's some anxiety there. So yeah, you have to just, you talk through it in advance and make sure that you can tell them what to expect as much as possible, describe it as well as possible.
I guess, what did you learn as a coach about your team from that, and maybe individually, what did the women learn about themselves from the first race?
Well, I think some of those freshmen realized that even though this is, next level up, that if you work hard and you surround yourself with a good team, that you can make that step to the next level. We had some freshmen on this women's team that stepped up and did that. So yeah, I think that's the main thing we learned.
Hey, you were talking about, and again, if people don't know, cross country, it's you're not running around a track, things like that. Are some men and/or women better suited for or like cross country better than track, or vice versa?
That's a great question, and it's absolutely true. Some, you think that you race 10,000 meters in a men's cross country race, you race 10,000 meters on the track. Why wouldn't that be pretty darn similar? Well, the distance is similar, the physical demands are kind of similar, but some folks just aren't as quick a foot, spend more time on the ground, so to speak, and those kind of folks, even if they've got a really good aerobic engine, a good body physiologically for a distance race, those kind of folks that aren't fleet of foot would do better in cross country than on the track. Matt Logue was a prime example. He was a guy that was one of the best in the country in cross country, and you couldn't get him to qualify to nationals in the 10K on the track, but he had that special. He was a mudder, if you will. If you're a racehorse, the worse the conditions, the better, and that's the beauty of cross country, because every course brings a little something different, whether it's hilly, muddy, flat, whatever.
Tom Van Hoy with Russ Jewett on the Pitt State Cross Country Insider Show this week. Pitt State men finished third the University Division at the Missouri Southern Stampede last weekend. So how'd they do overall?
I thought our kids did okay. I think typically, as is always the case, almost always the case, our first time out at 5-mile races, 8K, we lost concentration in the middle with several of our folks, especially our younger folks, and that's disappointing. But it's a process, so it's not like we're way behind the curve or anything. Now, I was pleased with Austin Bogina's race. He really put it on the line early, and he dropped back a few places after his aggressive first mile, but then he hung in there, and I thought he had about as good a race as anybody. And then we've got some other young kids that are coming along, and we held out Adam Volkert, who is perfectly healthy, but I just didn't want to race him 2 weekends in a row because he's had some injury history, and this is kind of it for him, and he's our best runner. And I think having him in the race in the future will give us a little more of a, an energy boost, if you will, mentally. Obviously, it'll help our score a lot, too.
You mentioned Austin Bogina, who did finish 10th, and he, of course, from Arma, from Northeast. You got a couple of Southeast Kansas kids on your team this year, don't you?
Yeah, we do. We like to get the best kids around, regardless of whether they're a small school kid, a large school kid, but we really don't take those local kids for granted. I think there's some of the bigger schools that do that sometimes, that kind of assume that those folks will just fall in their lap, but whenever there's a good runner in Southeast Kansas, and for a while there weren't that many, but recently, there have been some pretty good, and we really like to have them on the team, and Austin's a great addition to our program.
Was this a pretty competitive meet to see some pretty good runners in this one?
It really was, and it has been for a long time, and fortunately it's real close to home. Missouri Southern's fortunate to have, the kind of grounds that they do. They've got a cross-country course basically attached to their football stadium with all the amenities therein. So, and they attract some good Division II, NAIA schools, even a couple of Division I schools were there, and that's a great opportunity for us. So we've been, probably for 20 years now or so, we've been going to this meet about every year.
Yeah, I mean, that is to take into consideration. You just don't, drive around and develop a cross-country course, do you? No,
it really takes. If you want to host a competition of any size, you have to have a wide starting line. You have to long straightaway, 600 or 800 meters straightaway where it doesn't get too narrow too quick, and enough acreage total that you can do something where you're not having to run 4 or 5 loops of a course where people would get lapped. We're developing a course for our conference championship out at Countryside Golf Course, a little 9-hole course here southwest of town, and it's pretty challenging to lay it out just right so that you get a meaningful competition in.
Do you ever head to the one up in Lawrence? Was it Round Rock? Rimrock.
Yeah, we had our national championship there in 98, I think, was the last time we competed there as a team. We haven't gone back. They host one a year, I think, but it just doesn't ever work out with our schedule.
And how do you, around Pittsburgh, Kansas anyway, and when you go to some of these meets, and I know you're going to St. Paul this weekend, but how do you do any hill training?
Well, there are some hills around. We talk to recruits about this because obviously when someone that's not from around here comes and visits campus and they're a cross-country runner and hills are involved in the sport, where are your hills? Well, we drive. We load up in vans and we drive out near Mulberry. We drive barely over into Missouri, over near Nashville. There's some hills over there. And then there's some other places around. We get a hill here or there.
Sounds like you just, back of a pickup truck, drive them out, drop them off, and you go back and wait for them, right?
That's what Coach Centrum used to do. Only he wouldn't just drive. He'd drop them off and hound them. But we don't do the back of the pickup thing anymore. We take vans.
All right, so you got one in the books. Tell us a little bit about what's coming up this weekend.
Well, we're real excited. We're going up to the University of Minnesota for the Roy Griak Invitational, long-standing meet, and we've gone. We probably average every other year. We've gone up there. We went last year, and we're going again this year. It's an opportunity for us to see great Division II competition, a lot of parity among teams and individuals, and some of the schools in the north part of this new region that we're in. We're in the new central region, started last year, so we are in the far south, the extreme south end of this region. So we'd like to see some of those schools up there before the region meets, so this is an opportunity for us to do that. Great course. It's a 6K for women and an 8K for men, and great competition, very well run, and it's a nice trip for a bonding experience.
Yeah, it'd take you a while to get there, won't it?
Yeah, about 9 hours.
So you're pleased with the way things started, and then what are you looking for this weekend?
Well, we're looking for a better team performance from the men particularly. We're going to throw Adam Volkert in there, and we were also holding one more guy out that is healthy but just didn't want to race 2 weekends in a row. So really this is full force men's team here, and the last opportunity to have a really high-level competition before our conference championship. And the women Jessica Macy's gotten a little attention here. We'll see how she does against some of the better Division II runners in the country, because there'll be some of those there. And then just how our team fares in a little more intense and focused competition.
So before we wrap it up here, let me ask you about, I think most people know you're only, quote-unquote, supposed to practice 20 hours a week, maybe football or so. In terms of cross-country, How do you time that, and how does that work out? Do they get a day off? I mean, most guys in runners, I think, like to do it about every day, don't they?
Yeah, it depends on who you are, and we do only train together 6 days a week during the actual in-season part of the cycle. But some athletes do run every day. Some athletes get 3 or 4 rest days in a season, and some get one every week. We do 2 a day running, though, so if you average it all out, everybody's training way more than 1 time per day average. So some of these guys run 90 to 100 miles a week. Some of the girls, 60 to 70 miles a week, and probably spending about the same amount of time running on the high end of those. But it's a pretty demanding sport.
So what's the average percent of body fat for your own?
Tom, we don't do that anymore. We don't take body fat, but you eyeball them, and it's just lower than about anybody else walking around, I think.
I was looking on PittStateGorillas.com there at some of your guys. I'm going, oh, my goodness, are these guys in good shape? You mean they don't – remember the old days they used to put you in, a bathtub or something?
Well, yeah, we used to get in the pool, actually, over here at the weed, and they'd underwater weigh you, and that's an accurate way of determining your body composition and what your percentage of body fat was. And, of course, body comp is supposed to be important in distance running, but we really don't test that anymore.
That's Pitt State men and women's cross-country coach Russ Jewett. Nice 9-hour ride to St. Paul, Minnesota right this weekend. Well, it'll make that trip to Hayes in 2 weeks seem a little bit shorter. And by the way, we were talking about Jessica Macy at the outset, the senior who won the Missouri Southern Stampede, the 5K there in 3.1 miles. 16 minutes, 52.56 seconds, up by 36 seconds for that name, the MIAA Women's Cross Country Athlete of the Week. She beat all 19 Division I athletes, 170 runners in the field overall. At Olathe Northwest, a transfer from DePaul University in Indiana, sat last year as a redshirt. Well, that's this week's edition of the Pitt State Cross Country Insider Show with Russ Jewett. I'm Tom Van Hoy.